today we're going to be talking about ADHD and menopause. There's a lot of confusion about this, and we're asked about it so much in our menopause support groups and through our membership for Menno Health. So I'm really delighted today. We've got somebody who's going to try and clear things up for us, point us in the right direction, and give us a proper explanation and some real help. So Angie North, welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to your group today. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. A bit about me. So I am a specialist ADHD nurse working in an NHS clinic. And my role, very briefly, is assessment, diagnosis and treatment of adults with ADHD. Of course, today I'm representing myself. I'm not representing my organisation, so please do be aware of that. I also have a diagnosis of ADHD myself, and I'm going through the menopause. So can appreciate how difficult a lot of people find this time, particularly if you've got an underlying ADHD disorder or you've got a diagnosis of ADHD. And hopefully we'll go on to talk about that a little bit as we go forward. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Angie. It's brilliant because you really can speak from the heart as well as from experience and knowledge in your
Yeah.
profession, which I think it brings a unique experience to hear from you. We've got to start at the very beginning because I think people will be watching this either for themselves or for someone that they live with, work with. But we've got to understand first, well, what actually is ADHD?
Okay, so ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that can lead to difficulties with inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. That's putting it very simply because, struggling with or difficulties with, people find it incredibly impairing, and it can affect all aspects of somebody's life, at work, at school, further education, home life, social life. So it can really impact on every aspect of somebody's sort of daily living, really.
Mhm.
It's what it does, ADHD, you'll find struggles with regulating emotions and those cognitive and thinking skills, which we call executive function, which sounds very posh, but it's all those things that, somebody without ADHD who's not on a sort of, not neurodiverse may be able to complete quite easily. So yeah, and for women in particular, because we're talking about women today, ADHD was always kind of thought of as a naughty child condition, and it was something that you grew out of when you miraculously got to the age of 18. But more importantly for us women, it was always thought to be a boys' condition. So young lads, young men had ADHD, girls not at all. And that's because girls present very differently to our male counterparts. They tend to have that sort of dreamy kind of way about them in school and college, so that they're not displaying those hyperactive elements much. So they can sit at the back of the class, stare out the window, but not really achieve much, but get slip under the radar. But we'll talk about that a wee bit more anyway. So what ADHD is caused by oh gosh, sorry, I've got ADHD myself now. I've had my meds this morning. So it affects our neurotransmitters in our brains, particularly dopamine and serotonin and acetylcholine, which are the chemical messengers that kind of flick through our brains, telling us to, sit down or concentrate. And without those chemical messengers being as efficient as they could be, we then struggle with all these other activities. So that's a little bit about it. It can also have an impact on sort of people's physical health. We do know that people with ADHD are more likely to have cardiovascular disease, because they're not eating particularly well. If you can't organise yourself, you can't organise yourself to cook a meal, you're going to get something quick and simple. We do know that we see a lot of connective tissue disorders such as Ehlers-Danlos, allergic kind of reactions, sensitive skin. It encompasses a whole raft of conditions. The more we find out about ADHD, the more complex it seems to get. But
Yeah,
don't let that worry you, because we can help.
that's good.
um, so we don't necessarily know the exact causes of ADHD, but we do know there is a strong genetic component to this condition. So if you've got a sibling or a parent who's got ADHD, then you're more likely to have ADHD yourself. For example, I mean, I was adopted, so it never crossed my radar until I hit menopause. But my birth father and my birth mother's families, there's ADHD and autism on both sides of those families. And my daughter's got ADHD as well, unsurprisingly. But I didn't really notice it because I just thought, oh, she's just like me.
Yes.
So there's no way we can prevent ADHD. There's nothing that anybody's done to cause ADHD. A lot of mums particularly feel guilty, and honestly, there is no need to. It's got nothing to do with poor parenting or anything that anyone's done. It's just one of those things that has occurred. So I don't want people to feel guilty if they've got children with ADHD, because it's incredibly difficult.
I think most
Um,
parents feel guilty anyway about
yeah,
absolutely everything, don't they? So that is
yeah,
really important message to get across, and very,
yeah,
very reassuring. And
yeah.
and I mean, when you're talking about many of these things, it's perhaps difficult to say what are the symptoms. Say for people that are thinking this resonates, this is sounding like me or someone that they live with or work with, for example. Can you give us an idea of
Yeah.
what the symptoms are?
So the sort of inattentive symptoms are things like difficulty sustaining focus on a task. So, for example, my daughter and I used to have this thing: tell me you've got ADHD without telling me you've got ADHD. So you'd go downstairs, and I may have put the washing on, but it's been in the washing machine for 3 days because I've forgotten to take it out. I've got distracted. There's a cup by the fish pond because I've gone and had a little chat with the tadpoles, so I've left my coffee there, and there's something else going on somewhere else. So you may start many tasks, but actually not see any of them through to the end because you've become distracted, or you've forgotten, or something else more important or more exciting and more interesting has popped up. That's not a criticism of anybody. That is just the way it is. And you will find ways to work around that. Difficulty listening, even when someone's talking directly at you. People would have conversations with me, and I'd be looking them in the eye, and I'd be thinking, well, your lips are moving, but I don't actually know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because your mind is off somewhere else, thinking about what you're doing for tea, what you're doing for now, there's lots of other things going on. You're distracted by the noise around you. It used to be a standing joke whenever me and my husband went out anywhere, I'd be listening to somebody else's conversation at the other side of the room, and he'd be like, how can you hear that? It's like, why can't you hear that? I thought that was perfectly normal.
Yeah.
um, so struggles trying to organise your tasks and your activities, particularly when they need to be done in a particular order. Time management is, ADHD is magic time, because you can give yourself 5 hours in the morning to get to an appointment and you're still going to be late because you just can't manage your time. You struggle to meet deadlines. You'll leave it, quite often leave things right to the last minute. And then suddenly go, oh my God, I haven't done that work. And then you're pulling an all-nighter to get it done. Um, Avoiding tasks that you dislike, becoming very task avoidant, or things that require a sustained mental effort, such as preparing reports or completing forms. So, in the workplace, when you're trying to write a report for somebody or doing some data for somebody, it can be really tedious, and you're going to put it off. And they're all things that you might experience. Misplacing things is a biggie with somebody with ADHD. So the amount of times I can't find my car keys, my purse, my bag, my shoes, it's ridiculous. But that is, a very common symptom of ADHD. It used to cause havoc in our household because I would think that my husband and my daughter had moved my car keys, for example. Be like, where are they? It'd be like World War III. And then they'd find them and I'd go, well, you must have hidden them because you knew where they were. But that's ADHD.
Yeah.
It's a bit bonkers, really.
Mm.
Forgetting to complete tasks such as paying bills, get yourself some direct debit set up, or returning important phone calls, or your mate will text you and you'll think, oh yeah, I'll text back and I'll do it in a bit, and then you'll forget, and then the time's passed, then your mate thinks you're not the mate anymore because you haven't oh my God, and missing appointments altogether. I didn't miss an appointment. I went to my dentist recently and said, I've got an appointment today. And they went, oh, have you? Yeah, 11 o'clock. Yeah, that was last year, Ange. So, it's I turned up a year late.
That is a whole year late, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This must
But the
massively affect people at work as well.
Yeah, it
When
really
there
does.
are things that have to be done by a certain time. So yeah, I can imagine it has a huge impact on your life and those around you.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And some of the other symptoms sort of associated with impulsivity and hyperactivity are feeling restless and like you need to move around. So you might find, somebody with ADHD might be twizzling in the chair. They may not be sort of running around like, a 12-year-old boy might be doing because you learn to control it, but you get that inner restlessness, which feels like a sort of internal motor trying to drive you forward. So you're sitting in meetings, twiddling your thumbs, clicking your fingers, waggling your leg, or clicking a pen, twizzling in your chair. I used to get up a lot and go, I just need a wee.
Yeah.
So I'd get up and go and leave the room. Sort of feeling uncomfortable when you're having to sit for long periods of time, such as meetings or at a restaurant or going to the pictures. It can be extremely difficult. Queuing, oh my goodness, sort of queuing in the supermarket, or if you're an adrenaline junkie, queuing somewhere like Alton Towers, standing in those queue lines is a bit of a killer as well. Talking too much in social circumstances, so you might be the voice that everyone's hearing, and finding it difficult not to interrupt in conversations, not because you're being rude, because you've got something to say, you want to say it, and you want to say it now because you might forget what you want to say, going forward. So interrupting frequently, difficulty, I've already said, difficulty sort of queuing, sitting in traffic. That was a big thing of mine. If I got stuck behind a Sunday driver doing like 20 or 30, I'd be like, ah, I'd be raging. I've started ADHD medication. I'm not raging and sort of, getting cross in traffic anymore. So that's quite helpful.
That's good.
Finding it hard not to take over and lead in an activity. You'll often find people with ADHD kind of, just taking over and going, come on, we need to get this done. Let's do it, because they're all enthusiastic. And they may absolutely hyper focus on things. So that's one thing that ADHD people are really, really good at. If you're really interested in something, you can spend hours and hours and hours doing it. And then all of a sudden you wake up the next day and you go, I'm really bored with that. Yeah, no, I don't want to do that now. And then you move on to the next thing. I've got loads of hobbies and projects that I've started. I'm really into it. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm bored with that now.
Yeah.
And difficulty again, sort of filtering out relevant information. So background conversations. Today I'm very quiet. I'm the only one here. So I'm focused totally on what we're doing. But I can become very distracted very quickly. If I'm working, for example, in an open plan office, it's just like, it's much more fun to chat and get on
Yeah.
with your work. And that kind of just feeling like you've got too many tabs of you open, that all the tabs are open, there's some music coming from somewhere, you don't know where it's coming from, and it's just like, whoa. And it can lead to a complete overload,
Yeah.
and just actually going, I can't do any of this, and just kind of
Hmm.
stuck in what you're doing. So they are some of the common reported symptoms. There's a lot, isn't there, to think about?
There is, and it really highlights how it can affect so many areas of your life. And I
Yeah.
know we're going to try and focus in on menopause. A lot of what you're saying, you can see this turbulence. And when it coincides with perimenopause and the hormones going haywire, no wonder it can get very confused. So, can you tell us a little bit more about how it affects you with menopause as
I
well?
can, yeah. When I've got a particular interest in women's health, particularly women with ADHD, because we do know that women with ADHD struggle at puberty, they struggle throughout that sort of menstrual cycle, pregnancy and menopause because of the estrogen. And, alongside all these symptoms that I've already talked about, what we do find with women is that struggle to manage emotions, feeling overwhelmed, heightened anxiety, low mood. And, a lot of women do get misdiagnosed with things like bipolar disorder or emotionally unstable personality disorder, when actually it's ADHD. And, a lot of my ladies come to me who have been through mental health services, who have been on lots of sort of antidepressants, antipsychotics, medications that haven't worked. And that's really telling. But in terms of thinking about symptoms of menopause and ADHD, there is a real overlap. So symptoms of ADHD we've talked about. So that impulsivity, that hyperfocus, and that disorganization. Then we start looking at menopause creeping in. So we get those fluctuations in our neurotransmitters because we know that we need estrogen to keep those going. That occurs in ADHD and menopause. That trouble with focusing. So we talk about brain fog, don't we, a lot in menopause. You've already got it if you've got ADHD, so you've already got that trouble, difficulty focusing, you've got that brain fog, you've got those issues with memory. So that is almost like a double whammy, if you like, isn't it?
Yeah.
A negative self-image. We get to a certain age and we start to kind of look back at the women we used to be, and that's very common in women with ADHD, and we find it with women in menopause, don't we?
Yes.
Um, Feelings of fatigue, forgetfulness, anxiety, those mood changes, the sleep issues, and changes in libido are all associated with ADHD and menopause. And then, menopause specific can be the depression, those unpleasant sort of genital and urinary changes that some of us experience, and the changes to skin and bone and hair and weight and management, and those wretched old hot flushes, which are definitely menopausal and not ADHD. So that's a bit of a whistle stop tour, but there is a big overlap. And for women who have got ADHD or maybe undiagnosed ADHD, it's not until you get to menopause that, for a lot of us, it suddenly becomes very apparent that we are struggling more than perhaps we thought we would do, because we're getting a double sort of whammy of those
Yes.
symptoms. And certainly my experience, I've been nursing for 39 years. I was very young when I started my nurse training. I nearly gave up my career because I didn't realise I'd got undiagnosed ADHD. I was struggling with my menopause, and honestly, I couldn't function. I just thought, is this it? Is this it for me? And it wasn't until sort of friends, family, work colleagues kind of said, "Have you thought about this?" And it's like, oh, okay. And I got I got my HRT treatment, I got ADHD treatment, and here I am talking to you today. So, that's really exciting, and hopefully, gives people hope for the future, really.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I think is everything we want to do is educate and empower
Yeah,
people to feel less frightened about things and find out what they can do. And they're not alone. I mean,
yeah,
listening to your story, I think so many people are going to go, it's almost a relief to hear
yeah.
this, and they're not going mad and there's nothing awfully wrong with them. Now, you mentioned you were diagnosed only when you hit perimenopause years.
Yeah.
So, how do you get diagnosed?
Okay, so what you're going to need to do is go to your GP and ask for a referral to your local ADHD service. Now, I am aware, and we're in the same position, that there are many, 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 many waits. I mean, for our service, it's a 5-year wait at the minute. So, what you can do is you can ask to be referred to an NHS provider, but you can also go through Right to Choose. If you do go down that route, be careful and just make sure that it's a diagnostic and treatment assessment that you're asking for, because a lot of Right to Choose providers will do a diagnosis but won't necessarily treat you. But your GP will know that. So, if you do go to your GP and say, I've got ADHD, then, I want to go through Right to Choose because of the waiting lists. You won't have to pay. It's paid for by the NHS. You'll go to a private provider. The NHS will pay for that. and you'll get your diagnosis and you'll get your treatment. But it's really important to ask for that treatment element as well.
Absolutely. And the treatment, presumably, you mentioned earlier, really changed how it
Yeah.
affects you in your daily life?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I didn't get my diagnosis until how old am I now? I can't remember how old I am now, but I didn't get my diagnosis until later on in life. And I was kind of thinking, do I want to go on treatment? I've got this far. And I gave treatment a go. Now, there's various medications, and I'm not going to go into them in detail, but we've got stimulant medication and we've got non-stimulant medication. So the first line treatment for ADHD is stimulant medication. And people get a bit frightened. You might have heard of children on Concerta who've had too much and they've ended up being all zombified, or that, that is a bit of a misnomer. We prescribe stimulants because our brains cannot stimulate those neurotransmitters that we need, the dopamine, the serotonin, the acetylcholine, without stimulant medication. So that's what that's doing. That's just stimulating those pathways in your brain. It's not going to make you hyperactive. It has the opposite effect, actually. If you're someone who's hyperactive and you take ADHD medication, it brings down those levels of hyperactivity and inattention. I know when I first started prescribing in ADHD, I was like, oh, we're prescribing stimulants for someone who's hyperactive. That seems a bit contradictory. But
Yes.
actually, when you think about the chemistry and what goes on behind it, that's the reason we use stimulant medication. Now, when I started my treatment, I tried one stimulant and I hated it, and it suppressed my appetite. It gave me headaches, and it really didn't work on my ADHD symptoms. So I was switched to a different one. Perfect. Although I forgot to take it this morning, but that's what happens. And that's really helped with my concentration, my focus, that emotional dysregulation. And for me, I'm actually studying a master's at the minute. I know I'm mad. It was either retirement or study, so I thought I'd go and do a master's.
Good for you.
And that was one of the reasons I wanted to start treatment, was so that I could study and focus, and that I'm able to do that. But actually, I'm so much more able to just carry out my activities of daily living now as well. For example, I went to the supermarket with my husband, and I'd forgotten my ADHD medication. I'm a terrible example. I'm really sorry. Take your meds. And I hadn't taken my ADHD medication, and I was up and down the aisles, and I'm going, oh, we're doing this for tea, so I need to get chicken. Oh, if we're doing fajitas, I need to go over there. And honestly, it took me about 3 days to do a day's shopping. And I said to my other half, was it always like this? And he was just like stoically pushing the trolley and went, yeah, pretty much. Because I hadn't realised.
Yes.
So it
Yeah,
does make a really big difference. But if you
absolutely.
go off and get your diagnosis and treatment, you can talk to your treatment provider about what's going to be best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I presume a little like menopause, we're all very different, our
Yeah,
experiences, and it's finding the right thing for you.
yeah.
Um, so we talked right at the start about having some hope and making this a practical session so people go away and think, I can try this, do that, and at least feel that this isn't something that they're an unwilling passenger. There are things that they can try to do to
Yeah.
help themselves. What would your top tips be, Angie?
Well, my top tips would be ADHD treatment and HRT. But of course, not everyone can take HRT, and not everyone's going to get on well with ADHD treatment. So there are other things that you can do to help yourself. And one of the first things you can do is just think about your lifestyle. So making small adjustments to help your everyday habits can really help your symptoms. So sleep. If you're somebody with ADHD, it's really difficult to sleep. So, and when you get menopausal, you're having your hot flushes, and it's really difficult, isn't it? But just make sure that you have a consistent bedtime and get up on time, and just make sure that your room is restful, it's dark, it's cool. Avoid your laptops and your phones scrolling before bedtime. Avoid caffeine before bedtime, so no teas, no coffees, no cigarettes, if you're a smoker, because they're all stimulants and they're all
Yeah.
going to kind of impact on your sleep. Cut down on the amount of caffeine and alcohol you're drinking. We do know that alcohol can cause hot flushes, and it's not great when you're menopausal. You don't want to be adding to that.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
and a lot of people with ADHD do drink more alcohol just to kind of dampen down those symptoms.
Yeah.
Alcohol makes you feel like you're getting a good night's sleep, but you're not getting that REM sleep, so you're not getting that deep, restful sleep that you need. So avoid alcohol and try to relax before you go to bed. A bit of meditation or breathing exercises. You can do body scans, can't you, where you're kind of going down and looking at your toes and tensing your muscles and kind of working your way up your body. So there are lots of things that you can do. I've started listening to podcasts actually, which really help and just divert my attention so I can listen to that. And before I know it, I haven't got to the end of any of them yet because I've gone to sleep. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
finding what works for you when it comes to sleep. Things like weighted blankets, people find, who've got sensory difficulties can find those quite
Yeah.
comforting and helpful. And eye masks, as long as you're not squishing your eyes, So just find ways that work for you, really. Stress, trying to avoid stress. I know that's very difficult. We're all very busy people, aren't we? But if you can
Yeah.
just find a little bit of time for yourself to do nice things, to do a bit of relaxation, even if it's just going to, to have a shower and wash your
Yeah.
hair, if things like that, very simple things. Fidget toys are great. We have a box of fidget toys in our clinic where people can just come and play while they're talking to us, or stress putty or squishy stress balls, whatever you find helpful. That can be quite helpful if you're feeling stressed.
Hmm.
um, Things like supermarkets and shopping, if you get overwhelmed on a Saturday morning when it's really, really busy, maybe change your time, so go in the evening when it's quieter, or order it online. There are ways to do these things. Try and plan meals and things in advance so that you're a little bit more organized, and just try and set yourself realistic goals and expectations and be kind to yourself. You know, we are our own worst critics, aren't we? I think, and particularly as we get a little bit older and, we get menopause, we're then kind of just criticizing ourselves and I've failed, or,
Yes.
you haven't. You are a wise woman who has got this far, and, you deserve to be kind to yourself, now. This is our time.
Yes.
Um, we do know exercise releases dopamine, which we've talked about, which can help sustain attention and clear thinking and mood as well. So, you don't have to go to the gym and be pumping iron all day, every day. It can be a little bit intimidating. I'm not a big fan of gyms, but I go occasionally. But even going for a walk in nature, if you've got a local woods nearby and it's safe and you can do that, then, go for a lovely walk in nature. Or if you like running or you like going to the gym, then do these things. There's yoga classes, which are great, spin classes, get some exercise. And if you can take some mates with you, that's even better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. Yeah.
and exercise, it reduces that stress and anxiety. It helps you maintain a bit of calm. It reduces that sort of compulsive behavior and that impulsive behavior that you might have. And it also helps with your working memory and improves executive functioning because you're getting all those dopamine, all those reward centers ticked off. And you're going to walk out and feel much, much better. The key is get in there.
Yeah.
So do what I do, get a gym buddy who's going to drag you out and say, come on, let's get down to the gym.
Yeah, definitely. It makes such a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Having somebody to be almost accountable to. And even if it is just that walk, you're walking, you're talking, you don't notice that isn't seen as exercise and it's not unpleasant, but it has huge benefits. So, yeah,
yeah,
simple things often work the
yeah,
best. Yeah.
definitely. And then, in sort of day-to-day things, particularly sort of in work, make sure that you have reminders to take a break, because people with ADHD can get hyper focused, and before you know it, 4 hours have gone by and you're like, oh, I haven't moved. I've done it myself, and you kind of like you stand up and you're like, oh, God, my knees hurt because I haven't moved for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Factor in some breaks. Do things like run up and down the stairs at work instead of getting the lift, and make sure you have a regular lunch break. No matter where you work, get away from your desk, go for a walk, have something to eat.
Yeah.
Um, Other things that you can do is, maintain a healthy weight. We do know that people with ADHD can struggle with weight gain, again, because, it's those quick fix, high fat, high sugar, high calorie foods that people just turn to, like biscuits, crisps, cakes, sweets, because you haven't thought about what you're going to have for lunch. So try and plan in advance if you can, and take your, either go out and get a healthy lunch or take some lunch to work with you. Watch your cholesterol, check your blood pressure. And exercise is really going to help with that. Now, we do know that there is nothing to suggest that diet or nutrition alone causes ADHD, but we do know that some, particularly when we get to menopause, we need to be thinking very clearly and carefully about what we're eating to make sure that we're keeping as healthy and active as we can. So you might want to be focusing on a high protein diet, beans, pulses, eggs, that type of stuff. Keep away from processed foods, cakes, crisps, sweets, all the things that people with ADHD love. And the sort of complex carbohydrates. So make sure you're eating plenty of fruit and vegetables. We all know this, don't we? Omega-3 that we find in salmon and sardines and mackerel and walnuts and Brazil nuts. Just be really mindful of that. And vitamin D, a lot of us don't realise that we can become quite deficient in vitamin D and vitamin B12. So get yourself some vitamin D and B12, and that will help as well, because we do know that they both help with sort of brain functioning. So there's probably more research that's needed, but it's certainly worth thinking
Mm.
about. And foods that you're going to want to avoid are those refined sugars, sweets and chocolate. I'm sorry, I know. Food with corn and sort of maize starch and syrup in them, the white breads, white flour, pastries, white rice. Go for the whole meal, go for brown rice, just make small changes. Um, yeah, so that's probably my advice to
That's
you.
brilliant because these are all things people can do. As you
Yeah,
say, this isn't a massive change. It's little tiny things that people can
yeah,
do, just adding one or two a week and building them in until it becomes a habit. And in
yeah,
a way, it just gives you back that sense of control again, doesn't it?
absolutely.
And I think that's what we all need, particularly during menopause. Now, a lot of people, you mentioned about leaving work and feeling like they just can't cope anymore. So this has been brilliant to be able to give lots of information about the whole picture. Where can people go to get more help and support?
Okay, so you can speak to your GP about getting an ADHD diagnosis. That's probably your first step, which is really, really helpful. And I can send you a link, Julie, to some sort of screening tools that people might find helpful. Unfortunately, there are not many services available for adults with ADHD that don't involve a cost, but I can send you some links to some useful organisations. The ADHD Foundation is a charity that's quite helpful, and we know that they are very reputable. So I can send you a few links and sort of packs and things that people can use and sort of look at, certainly. I would avoid TikTok, guys, because there's a lot of misinformation spread through social media. Um, yeah, so and if you've got any sort of local groups, maybe they can be quite helpful. Groups such as yours, Mano Health, there might be a group of you there that think, oh, actually this resonates with me. Maybe we could take this further and get our heads together more often. It's often about just having that support and understanding and recognition of a condition that can be quite overwhelming, and just sharing your experiences with other people who are in a similar position is so important, and really very much needed, particularly for women with ADHD.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm not
And I
very
know from
helpful,
some
but
of the support groups that we've run, and when people are saying to us they feel utterly lost because
yeah,
they're just not sure of what's the matter, how to cope, where to go. So talking about it is the key.
definitely.
Learning about it is amazing, and then empowering yourself to do something about it,
Yeah.
and reach out, talk to others, and get that diagnosis if possible. We know there's long waits, but your practical information, I think, will be so helpful to so many people.
Oh, good. I hope so. I mean, I'm delighted to be here today because I think it's really, really important. And from my own experiences, I wouldn't want anyone to kind of go through that.
Yes,
And we do know that, GPs and healthcare services can be a bit dismissive of women's health, unfortunately. And I'm not speaking out of turn because there's been lots of research around it.
indeed.
So, it's taking that first step and just talking to your GP
Yeah.
and not taking no for an answer, really.
Yeah, exactly. And sadly, even with menopause alone, people are still not always getting that help that they need. So we've really got to advocate for ourselves, haven't we? And
We
that's
have.
where having this information is power that will help us to go and seek the right support. As you say, not just put up with things.
Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for today, Angie. It's been really informative and
I
helpful.
hope so.
Thank you, Angie. And we'll definitely be sharing the links that you've mentioned with everybody too.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.